of intersemiotic translation today. And first, I will introduce our guest speaker a little bit briefly, and then I and Veronika will have like a conversation on intersemiotic translation and whole projects. So you can feel free to put in the chat your questions. And finally, we will have like 30 minutes Q&A from our audience. Okay, so first, Veronika is an art curator and co-founder of Ukraine's annual literary and translation festival called Translatorium, a member of the collaborative translation Verbasia, a recent MA in the comparative literature program at Dartmouth College. So today she will share some of her research recently and also a very wonderful work in translation. And I also want to have a special thanks to Camelia, my friend, who's also joined today because connect us with Veronika. And so we have this wonderful event today. So please welcome our guest speaker.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here via Zoom today, but still I'm happy that you are hosting me. And it will be just great to speak, to share about the intersemiotic translation and translation in general. To be honest, it's my first personal event when I'm a speaker, not an organizer or like a creator of an event, because like having this experience with the translation festival, I always organize events by myself and facilitate them. But today I have another role, which is a great pleasure for me. So I will, I guess, speak about my two big projects, and maybe I will start with the intersemiotic translation in general, and will share my thoughts, because I'm not an expert, so I'm happy that our meeting today is an informal meeting and we can discuss everything together. So please be free to ask questions whenever you have one, and it will be just great. Translation. It happened so that my first university, I have a degree in translation, so I studied translation for 5 years in the university in Ukraine. And while studying, I was suffering a lot because I thought it was not my field and it was a mistake to study translation. It was not very interesting for me to make a kind of a formal job, like translating different technical texts, especially, but I was always interested in literature and in poetry as well. So I remember one class with my professor, and he just mentioned briefly that among different types of translation, there is an intersemiotic translation, which is a new one actually in the academia, but a very promising field and interesting field to make a research in. And I remember this moment because it was like a game changer. I thought, oh my God, maybe it sounds actually interesting, so maybe I will try to read about it or do something by myself. But at that time, I couldn't find like sources for the intersemiotic translation. It was like 10 or 12 years ago, and I just like, together with my friends, when we co-created this translation festival in Ukraine, Translatorium, we started to think how to work with translation and with different media, with different types of art, because we were going to speak to the bigger audience, to communicate about it through different types of art. And that is why we had to like try by ourselves how it works. And it was a very interesting path of trying and practice. So first of all, for me, translation is reading. So I guess every person who reads translates the message to themselves for it to be recreated in mind, or like speaking out loud. And this is the first step of translation, when we grasp the idea of the written text. And then every time we work with translation, we just try to, for example, share our thoughts with other people. This is translation as well. Or we can try to recreate a picture and write it down as an impression. For example, we visited an exhibit and saw a picture or a drawing, and then we try to fix our idea about it on a paper. So this is also translation in a way. So what I understood is that a translation, first of all, is a variable thing. So there is no ideal translation. There is no like the way how we can translate, and that's it, you know. So we can translate many times, and the more translations we have, the better, because this is the way of communication. So another key idea for me is communication through translation, or like reading through translation. Also, translation is a never-ending process, because as you know, like when you start to translate, you feel that this is not perfect. You want to improve it many times, or you want to leave it for like a week or so, and then to come back to it and reread it or rewrite this translation. And it happens to everyone in this field. This is normal thing in general. And I guess it's also about communication through translation with different people who are working in the field, or who are working with this piece of text, or with this author. So it's really great to share our common problems, or like issues in this work. And it becomes like a crowd translation with many people who are discussing one thing, and who are communicating through it again. So in this way, I guess that translation can serve as an activity for many people who can share it and be happy to communicate through this type of art. Because usually, you know, translators work in a shade, so no one knows who translated this book. We just read it and are fascinated with the author itself. But actually, every translation is an artistic activity, and a translator is also an artist in a way. Studying translation at Dartmouth and working on my own project, I was trying to think about theory first of all, and to understand like how to speak about intersemiotic translation, because it's a different type, and maybe I have to argue why I work with this type of translation. So I would like to share my presentation with you and speak more about, like, start with theory and then show my pieces. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see your presentation.
Great. So translation is actually the word translation is a Latin word. It is it means carry across or bringing across. So basically, it's when we carry the meaning between different languages. And language, it is not just language when we are using words. So every type of art has its own language. The translation, one of translation theorists, Roman Jakobson, distinguished three types of translation, and you can see it on this slide. So first type is intralingual translation or rewording. It's one, actually it's an interpretation of verbal signs by means of other signs in the same language. It means that we take the text, for example, and make an adaptation of a novel for kids, for example, yes, using the same language, but working with another audience or something like that. Interlingual translation or translation proper is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of some other language. So actually, when we speak about translation, usually we think about this type of translation, interlingual translation, when we translate between different languages and we are working with the written text. And intersemiotic translation or transmutation is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of non-verbal sign systems. So actually, this is, for me, it is the most interesting type of translation because it is about different types of art, and it is about making our own language, making our own method of translation, because it's really hard to say how to translate between different types of art. Every type of art has its own sign system and its own stylistic devices, and it's just very interesting to feel how these devices work together and how we can mix them together and make them readable for the audience. So there is a quote, I really enjoy it. So communication in words is only a particular case of human language. It is from Walter Benjamin. And I think, so from one side, it is a very simple quote, but from another side, it is like, it is about this variety of thoughts, and that the translation is just a bigger thing which we are using in our everyday life, and it is about every human being, not just like professionals, translators, or people who work with literature. Another thing in translation in general and intersemiotic translation is transposition. So when Roman Jakobson distinguished these three types of translation, he immediately understood that it is impossible to speak about the equivalence in translation. We cannot just translate a text into another language, like in general, different language, without losing meaning, losing form, losing something. So this is like utopia to translate, to make an equivalence. But we can transpose, we can find like the closest elements in another language and try to transpose this piece of art, a text, into another language. And transposition is a term actually from the music theory, and it means to transpose the tune to another key. So it will sound, you will understand that this is the same tune, but it sounds a bit different, you know, like, it happens with all the texts when we are translating. So we are reading, and if we compare the original text with the target text, so we can see which elements are lost, but which elements are new elements, because languages are very, you know, rich, language is a rich flow of different elements. So if we lose something, we can gain something in another language as well. So there are three types of transposition. It is interlingual transposition from one poetic shape into another, interlingual transposition from one language into another, and intersemiotic transposition from one system of signs into another. Again, I'm working with intersemiotic transposition in my projects, and now I would love to share my project, the most recent project, my MA essay at Dartmouth College. So this is the title: "The Birds That Embrace Both Illusions: An Intersemiotic Translation of All Watched Over by Machines of Love and Grace" by Richard Brautigan. This is a bit bizarre title for academia, actually, but I can explain it more for you. So first of all, I will say some words about Richard Brautigan. So Richard Brautigan is an American author. He's a novelist and a poet, and he's the most famous maybe for his novel Trout Fishing in America. But actually, I was working with his poetry, and All Watched Over by Machines of Love and Grace is a series of poems. So it's like poetry compilation. And I used this book for my translation, and I selected different poems from this book and tried to transpose the poem into tea bowls. So I took one poem and translated it into a tea bowl. So "The Birds That Embrace Both Illusions" is a quote from one poem, from the first poem, which is the next slide in my presentation. And I think that it is the most maybe great metaphor for Richard Brautigan's poetry in general, because he's comparing and combining several topics, and among them there are Zen Buddhism, popular culture in America, absurdism, Western culture and Eastern culture, and like different and even like childishness or naive art. So I guess that what he's doing, he's embracing like both illusions or all illusions and mixing them in a bizarre way. And actually translators are doing the same, I guess, because every time we're translating, we're mixing different elements. We are trying to find our own, to make our own creation, actually. So here you can see on one side there is a poem and the pictures of my tea bowls. I'm not sure how to do this. Maybe you'll take your time to read, or I can just speak and you will read simultaneously. What will be the best? Please tell me.
I think you can read aloud and we can follow the line on your presentation. Okay.
Okay, I guess I won't read the poems because I have like 9 of them or something.
Oh.
Maybe I will just try to speak about the elements and how I translated them. So in this very poem, we can, like, there is actually the combination of different elements, and these both illusions I was talking about. And I tried to recreate this somehow in a physical form, which is another challenge. But when I was thinking about poetry has this physical form as well, because the form of a poem matters a lot. And this is the element we preserve in translation. We change everything, of course, even when we do interlingual translation, so we translate between different languages using words, but still we preserve the rhyme somehow. We try to recreate the like allusions, like all the sense of the poem, and also the sound, which is important because all the alliterations and assonance, they make the feeling of the poem, even if you don't understand the language. So usually sometimes when people make poetry readings, poems which are translated into different languages, so if they have time, they can read both the source text and the target text. For us, just to hear the sound, because the sound matters a lot. It is like a piece of a form of the poem. So thinking about it, I understood that it will be really interesting for me to work with the physical form, and in this case, I will try to make an accent on this form itself. And here with this T-bowl, I used this idea of both illusions. That is why I made a kind of two spheres that are linked together. And in the poem, we can see the strange word like violence here. So in this line, it is a very bizarre word, as if it is like not on its place. So if we read birds that embrace both illusions like violence, eating pieces of apple pie. So this is a really strange simile. And Richard Brautigan makes it deliberately because following the idea of Zen Buddhism, he tries to like break our common flow of thinking and to encourage us to feel something new, or like to reach satori, or like enlightenment, which is the key element of Zen Buddhism. And that is why using words and using this strange simile, it happens like a break of thinking in a way. And with the physical form, I tried to add this drinking straw, which also like the element which is optional here, but I guess it recreates somehow this idea which is in the poem itself. Here I tried to use 3 stanzas and to make 3 T-bowls, each T-bowl for 1 stanza. And the poem is about machines, of technologies, and nature. And I tried to combine these 2 topics in my pieces. And that is why I use different leaves, grass, flowers, branch, even to make this pattern on the surface of T-bowls. And also I generated binary code for this poem. And if you can read in binary code, so you will understand that all 3 T-bowls together mean machines of love and grace. And this is the poem, which is titled All Watched Over by Machines of Love and Grace. Another poem and translation is about a small boy and an elderly woman who are playing Chinese checker together. And here I tried to recreate this game, and these balls are movable, they can move around. And also in this poem, these 2 people, they are drinking tea, and obviously you can drink tea from this bowl as well. With this tea bowl, I tried to think about this idea of like space, or like sky, which has no angles, you know. So it is like a sphere, but also like a void. And there is light in the very bottom of this bowl. So this is like, it is not that visible on the picture, but it is white, and the whole bowl is black. So when you take it, you can see that this is just a bright spot on the very bottom of the bowl, which is a kind of a light of a star from this poem. Here I tried to work with the surface and the idea of dance, because the poem is about sky dance. And actually, this type of throwing is called dancing yunomi. It's when you see this, the surface is uneven, and first I throw an even piece, but then I use my fingers to make it not that ideal, you know, to make it uneven. And I think that this is also an exact example of working with the idea written in words and the idea which is on the surface of a bowl. With this, it was interesting to work with this series because Richard Brautigan talks a lot about the idea of growing plants out of books. So like he says that books are not that important, but we need to care about nature in one of his series. And this poem is about the California native flowers. And in the very end, you may see, so flowers and vegetables may grow from these pages. And I was thinking about something that is in transition between being a book and being a vegetable or a flower. That is why I decided to recreate this surface of many pages, which are very old, or they are wet because they are like growing from, trying to grow from the ground. That is why this form is also uneven, but I think it has, so it makes an impression of a nature form as well, or even like a bark or a tree, something like that. And here is another poem from this series. Again, I tried to work with pages of a book, so I guess you can understand, and they're like pretty easy to figure out that these are like pages on this main picture. And also I was trying to think about the flower itself. So Daisy has this yellow middle, and this foot is like a root for me here. So again, it's about growing from a book and being a plant. Another piece is from his Naive series, I guess. Here he is speaking about a trout. This fish is one of his main metaphors of his work. So there is even the whole novel about this fish, and we can see this image in many of his poems, and here as well. So I decided to make this fish, and this chavan. So it is like traditionally in Japanese aesthetics, this is a bowl for matcha tea, and I decided to make like 3 feet for it, and also it reminds me like maybe like a feet of a dinosaur, which is also present in this poem. This poem, this is a very beautiful poem, in my opinion, and it is about a kind of a friendship or a romantic relationship between between two creatures, let's say, a human being and a catfish. And I was thinking about how to recreate this mood maybe of this poem in a tea bowl, and not to make it very obvious, like not to draw a catfish or something on the surface of a bowl. So I decided to use these dots and this line in the middle of the bowl, because it is the same pattern which we can find at the catfish, but to make it round, so you can just see this pattern. It can be an allusion to the poem, but not the image itself. And this tea bowl is a very simple piece. And it is also about Japanese aesthetics, which was a great inspiration for Richard Brautigan as well. And there are many Japanese aesthetic principles and or aesthetic categories, and two of them are mono no aware and wabi sabi, which is simplicity, antiquity, beauty, when the piece is not perfect, and so on. So that is why I decided to make a very simple piece, which has a kind of an allusion to a poem. Here I tried to make another, to work a bit differently. So I decided to draw on the surface of a tea bowl, and to draw actually this boat, which is from the poem. So it is black here, and to make huge dots, red and green. In the poem, this is electric green and red, and with my piece, it happens so that they are much darker, which is also a very interesting thing when you work with pottery. You cannot predict the result. You can always try many times, as in translation in general, but every time it will be a unique piece and a surprise for you as well. So this happened to me with this tea bowl and with the colors, but still I guess it's interesting because the surface of a bowl is pretty even, and there is a combination of even three glazes, light white, red and green, and when they are together, white and red and white and green, so the colors are changing, and they are not that bright, and even they are a bit transparent, which can be also good for the poem, because here Richard Brautigan says about tears, and maybe it can also work as a method to translate it. With this piece, it's again like every time I work with a poem, I was trying to think how to translate it into a tea bowl and which method to use. And I even cannot count how many methods I used when I was translating these poems. But here I just tried to imagine how these burnt flowers would look like, because you can see. So I went to the castle to see the queen. She was in the garden burning flowers, and then they have a dialogue about these flowers. So like burnt flowers, how would you imagine this thing? And I was thinking about something which is almost white, or also about the idea of transition between being an object and being gone just. And that is why I used terracotta clay, which is red clay, and covered it with the special liquid called terra sigillata, and it is white, but it is also transparent, so you can see that the clay body has a different color from the like paint on the surface of it. And the form of a bowl resembles the flower itself. Next bowl also was trying to grasp several images from this poem. The key image for me was a plum tree, because a lady, an old woman, was carrying the plum tree on her back, and I tried just to draw in very simple lines, a plum tree, and you cannot see on this picture, unfortunately, the color of the plum tree, but it happened so that in the studio when I worked, there was a color for a glaze called plum. So it was just a funny thing that I used the special color to make a plum tree, and it was also called plum. And also on the bottom of the bowl, I was trying to recreate the image of a taxi car with these black squares, and also two lines, yellow lines of a road. So and the color of this bowl is dark blue, and also this color is called twilight color. And in this poem, it is about the evening time, or like twilight time of a day. And this is a very small poem, even haiku, of Richard Brautigan. Sand is crystal like the soul, the wind blows it away. And it is called Floating Chandeliers. For me, it was a very spacious poem and a very interesting combination of a title and the poem. And I was trying to think about the sound of this poem, about some very calm and pleasant feeling and pleasant sound which it recreates. And that is why for this tea bowl, I decided to make it a sound bowl. So actually in the foot of this bowl, there are pieces of clay, and if you shake it, it will make sounds. And for me, it is like a sound of a wind when there is a sand or like small stones which wind can blow out and make this shaking sound. And also when it cannot stand on this feet because it's round. So as you see, it can just go round and round, making this sound when you put it on the table. And you can also put it upside down. In this case, for me, it is like a chandelier, or like one of the most common and simple forms of a chandelier. So that's it with my MA project and with Richard Brautigan's poems. If you have any questions about it, we can discuss them now, or I can continue with another project as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really wonderful. I especially love the last poem and the shape of the table. And I have a question. I think many audience also have these questions in mind, like why you choose to translate the poem from an American poet into tea bowl, like it's very Japanese, as you said.
Yeah. First of all, it is about my interest or my interests in research. When I was a student in Kyiv, a national university, I was studying cultural studies, and all my papers were about Zen Buddhism in America, the influence of Zen Buddhism in America, popular culture. I made several researches of literature, of performance, of music, which grasped this idea of Zen and transformed it into like American type of Zen. And even the researcher Alan Watts says that there are two types of Zen in America: square Zen, which is like original Zen of like monastery work, and beat Zen, which is Zen which was popular during the Beat generation poets and writers. And actually, as a translator, I am translating several B-generation poets, and so these topics were topics I am interested in. And speaking about this very project, Richard Brautigan works with Zen Buddhism in a very implicit way. So you cannot say that it is Zen when you read it for the first time. Maybe, I think so. But when you read it more and more, you understand that you have this feeling that he is not using any kind of word or term which will indicate that this is Zen Buddhism. But in general, you have this feeling that he knows this way of thinking, and he tries to use it in his poetry or his fiction as well. So for me, I thought that it is one of the key topics of his poetry, and that is why I decided to try to use this tradition. And pottery in a Japanese tradition, it is linked to Zen also, because it's about, it can be said that it is a kind of a meditation, like a Zazen, a meditation, a sitting meditation. And also Japanese aesthetics as a separate categories also are linked to this idea of Zen Buddhism. And that is why I decided that Japanese style, not style, but like thinking about Japanese aesthetics and about Zen Buddhism will be the best when I work with my T-balls for this project. But again, you can see that I'm not a traditional person. So, and I'm a beginner actually in pottery. I combine different things. As the B-generation poets were doing, I was also trying to combine popular culture and traditional culture. And I had several like very funny things with these bowls. And like, for example, with this one, so I generated this binary code. It was just fun for me, but it works really good with the idea, I guess. And with this fish, actually, I did it like a print of a candy. So my son was eating, so he was fond of these candies. I don't remember how they're called. So there are very popular like jellyfish candies in the US. We just bought them several times, multiple times. And once I saw that it looks like trout and it fits me really good. So I just took one one candy and pressed it in clay. And then I put a piece of clay in this pressed place and had this fish for my bowl. You know, so this is like a crazy thing. So it is not a tradition at all, and Japanese tradition specifically, but you know, it's just funny to combine different things, mix them together.
Thank you so much for sharing. Mai has a question, so please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing. So I have a follow-up question to Dogun's last question. That is, have you like considered any other mediums of translation before deciding on pottery for this collection of poems? Thank you.
For this very collection, no, because I was working with an artist, with a Kyiv-based artist in her studio, and it was like a year and a half we were working together, and we were discussing different things just while we were throwing pots. And among them, it was poetry of Richard Brautigan. And I was, in that time, I was thinking that it would be just interesting for me to try to make a kind of a intersemiotic translation project with his poems and with pottery, because I was practicing. I was just starting to practice pottery at the time. And so this project, it was very natural for me. It grew up from my communication with the artist at the studio and with my own practice as a art curator of a translation festival in Ukraine. Because in the framework of the festival, we use different types of art, and we create different projects. And maybe I will just next I will tell about another big project, ongoing project, but which we started with the festival 2 years ago. So you still can see my presentation, right?
Yeah, we can still see.
Good. So the festival is called Translatorium. It is a literary and translation festival in Ukraine. It is an annual event dedicated to the International Translation Day, which is the 30th of September. And Translatorium is a festival, like the title itself says, about like translation workshop, translation laboratory. And we were thinking about making the conditions for translators or people who work with literature, or just people who are interested or love reading in general, how to speak about this field and to make it interesting to almost everyone. And we have the professional program for translators and writers and poets. These are workshops in different topics, and we have a program which has different art events and art projects. And I'm a curator of this art program. In the framework of the festival, we created a set of different intersemiotic translation projects. And among them, there was a huge mural on a building of the library in the city of Khmelnytsky, where the this festival takes place. So we took the topic of the space, the space of the city, and how we can read the space of the city as translators or as like writers, for example. And we had a text, and the artists recreated this text into image on a mural on a huge like wall of the library. So this was one of our like really huge projects of Translatorium Festival. And the project I was talking about, which is ongoing project, if I go through this link, will you still see? Oh, how to do this? Sorry. You can see only my presentation, or you can see my browser as well?
Just your presentation.
Okay. How to do this? 1 second. Okay. And now, can you see my browser?
I can see it now.
Mm-hmm. Great. So here is the project, Amadoka in the Language of Contemporary Classical Music. So this is a concert based on the novel by Sofia Androchovich. Sofia Androchovich is a Ukrainian writer, and she wrote a very great novel, excuse me, Amadoka, which is a novel about 3 the most traumatic periods in Ukrainian history. So this is a period of Stalinist repressions in the beginning of the 20th century, when the Ukrainian intelligentsia was killed the next is the Holocaust in Ukraine during the Second World War. And the third period is the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war, which started in the year 2014. And Sofia Andruchovich combines these three topics in a very interesting way. And this novel is, on one side, it is a historical novel, but so she uses these historical events, but she creates a great novel as a fiction book. And I was just thinking, as a curator of this project, I was thinking how to make this book accessible for the audience who didn't read it, and especially for the audience, for the foreign audience who cannot have the translation for now. And in this way, I was thinking about music as an art which is international art. So we understand the language of music because it is about emotions and about feelings. And we can, so obviously we cannot understand the plot of the novel through the concert, like if we just hear the concert, but we can have this feeling and our personal experience of the mood of the novel. And in this project, for me, it was the most important to the key idea was to share this experience, which actual experience cannot be shared. And this is the problem of empathy and of understanding of anything which borders different nations, because we can speak a lot about something, but another person will never have this experience by themselves. But when we create the situation of a concert, for example, so for this period of time, like an hour of time, people will experience this piece of art by themselves and will have their own understanding and their own feeling of the event. So this concert was created by 3 Ukrainian composers, and each of them was working with one of these topics of the novel I was mentioning before. And we had 2 performances. One was in Ukraine in 2021. It was our first performance, and another one was in Berlin last September. In this concert there are different musical instruments. So there's a grand piano, clarinet, a violin, pipe organ, voice, double bass, and it is also very interesting how to work with different musicians in different locations, because in Berlin we had several musicians from Ukraine who used to take part in this project before, and we also invited new people who interacted with us through this concert. And it was also important, I guess, in the process of this intersemiotic translation, because musicians also are readers of the written piece, and performing, they are telling something through their own story. And we can actually listen to these pieces. Here we have excerpts from one of each.
I think you need to share the audio.
Can you hear when I switch it on? No. Okay.
No.
Can you help me please with it?
I think you can stop sharing, and then when you reshare again, there's an audio check on the audio box, so you can share this out. Or you can send me the link so I can stop sharing it.
Let's try this now.
Yeah, this works.
Okay. Can you hear me if I speak?
Yes, I can hear you.
Shall I make it like...
I can hear both you and you.
Great. So this is the first part of a concert. It is called Ulyana, and this is about Stalinist repressions in Ukraine. So when Ukrainian intelligentsia suffered a lot from the Soviet terror, and in this part of a concert, the composer Richard Brautigan, he decided to use only violin as the main instrument, and also he used he changed the sound of the violin using his computer, and this strange sound you can hear right now. So this is also violin, but we placed the microphone on the violin itself, and the musician works with the bow, like making the sounds on the surface of the violin, like just like putting it upside down sometimes and just touching the surface of the violin. But because the microphone is placed on the violin itself, it makes the sound of something like... Okay. And it is very interesting just to see when there is only one person on the stage playing the violin, but somehow he can produce these strange and even horrifying sounds. The next part of this project, of this concert, is called Ramana. So here we have more instruments. This is violin, a pipe organ, voice, and grand piano. And this topic of this part is Holocaust in Ukraine during the Second World War. And the last part is called Ramana. This part of the novel is about the ongoing war in Ukraine and the Russian invasion in 2014. And even this piece, for me, it is, I can hear the sound of sea or water or something like this. On one side, it is about the title of the novel Amadoka, because Amadoka is believed to be the largest lake in Europe, which was on the territory of Ukraine in the medieval times. But for the unknown reasons, it just disappeared from the medieval maps. And for now, no one can say for sure whether it exists at all or not. So it's a kind of a legend, but like historians cannot like prove it or say that it is a fiction. story. And Amadoka as a lake is one of the metaphors of the novel, which lake, which as a memory, which just it was, but for the unknown reasons it's gone. And in the case of Ukraine, we know the reasons why it's gone. So it was deliberately, people were killed in 3 periods of Ukrainian history, modern history, and all the time it was about trying to kill the nation and to destroy the culture as well. And also the sound of the sea, of water, it is about the Black Sea in Ukraine, because in this very part of the novel, it's about the man who was a soldier in 2014 and was in the army and was fighting in the seashore in Ukraine. And it's also about this allusion to the plot of the novel. So in this project, 3 composers worked together, and they created this piece, which is in a dialogue. It makes the whole novel together, the whole sound novel. And this project is about intersemiotic translation, as I mentioned. And now, so as I also said, it is an ongoing project. We are trying to find possibilities to perform it in different countries. And currently, next month, I will be working on my own project, but for this concert, Amadoka. So I will make musical instruments out of clay, instruments which are using water for sound production. So again, it will be an intersemiotic translation project, because I will try to recreate some metaphors of the novel in the musical instruments, in the surface of the musical instrument, and these musical instruments will be serving for the concert and will develop the concert in general. So in this case, there will be 2 intersemiotic translation in one project, because the instruments itself are intersemiotic translation, and the concert is also intersemiotic translation of the novel. What about the time? Do we have time, or maybe it will be time for Q&A? Better.
Yeah, we still have time. So thank you so much. The first part of the concert is very the feeling of haunting and dissonance, and also the last part is very emotional and touching to me personally. And thank you for sharing all of that. I think I have some questions for you, and our participants, please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. And for now, I would like to ask how the clay instrument you share, why did you choose to make it from clay, and also how the instrument how the instrument help you reinterpret the novel?
Mm-hmm. First of all, I decided to work with a metaphor of Amadoka Lake. So the lake, I was fascinated with the idea of using water in the instruments for sound production. And in this concert, we already had one clay musical instrument, which is ocarina. This is a small instrument which makes sound like a bird, maybe, in a way. So this is like a round it's like an egg. Actually, I guess from Spanish, it can be translated like an egg surface instrument or something like this. So it's interesting that we used ocarina, and then I found out that there is a Ukrainian analog of this instrument which looks exactly the same, and it is the same size, like absolutely the same. This is like the equivalent, you know. Equivalents are impossible, but in this way, these two instruments, they're just identical. And I found that they were created even in the same time, but in different places of the world, like Mexico and Ukraine, for example, you know. And I was thinking about clay as a very archaic material, and it is also a very natural one. And when we for example think about different civilizations, and we try to find some pieces of the civilizations, or like in archaeology, so we usually can find some broken vessels, or like bowls or something, which will indicate about the culture of a nation. And in this way, I thought that clay as a ground, as a soil, and water, they too make a very natural materials for me to recreate this idea of the lake itself, and the lake as a metaphor also as water, which brings life, or like takes life, you know. In different cultures it means different things. And so yeah, I guess this is my answer.
Yeah. And I also want to ask a little bit more about your academic pursuit in intersemiotic translation, because besides being an art curator, translator, you also study and receive an MA at Dartmouth. So is there, like, how do you start to pursue this field as a scholar? And is there a specific department for that, or you practice somewhere else?
I think that there is no specific department for intersemiotic translation, but now translation studies are drawing attention to intersemiotic translation as well. And there is just a great book, Intersemiotic Translation Journey, I guess it's called. I can try to find it. So the book is about, it is like a compilation of different essays about intersemiotic translation. One second. No, try to find it. So this book is just great, and it was a great source for me and for my research. Oh yeah, here it is. Come on. Okay, you can still see. Translating across sensory and linguistic borders, intersemiotic journeys between media. I highly recommend this book for people who are just interested in intersemiotic translation, or who would love to read about several just great projects between different media. So there are about dance, and so usually all of them work with literature. And these combinations can be like literature or poetry and dance, poetry and visual arts, poetry and music, whatever. And it's just very, very interesting to see the practice of different artists in this field. And in my case, it was just trying to do something, and after that trying to learn how different people do this. So because when I just started with this topic in the framework of the festival, this topic was not that popular in Ukraine, especially. So I guess we were the first people who started to work with intersemiotic translation and to make these type of projects. 1 second, I'm sorry, I need to charge my laptop. And but now I guess there are many possibilities to study more about intersemiotic translation, even in academia. And I'm sure that Camelia can say something about the Iowa University and the translation department, because it's very active in the new ways speaking about translation. And I think that in this case of intersemiotic translation, it is also really important to keep in mind that actually no one can teach you how to do this. So you can read many things about how people do this and like sharing their practice, but it is up to you how to recreate it, how to transpose the message. And it is just a great possibility to wake up your creative impulse, because like people who are interested in reading, in literature, in translation, usually they are they can create things by themselves, and intersemiotic translation is a great possibility to try yourself, to try to speak through a different media. And as for me, I'm not a professional in ceramics. I'm just starting to work with ceramics. I'm not a professional in visual arts, but I was curating several projects in visual arts. I made several exhibits. I created this project with mural. So again, I'm not a musician, but I'm working with the concert, and I'm working with composers, and I'm speaking to them every time, and they call me like the boss of this project. They like ask everything about it, because it's about concepts. It's not about making music for me, but it is about making this link between music and literature. And like what actually translators are doing, they are making bridges between languages, and this is the most important, to figure out how it can work, how it can be readable.
Thank you. I am curious about like you said, you cannot work with all the media by yourself, like the music, and you are just like beginner in ceramic or clay. So like I would like to hear the process, how you work with new media, and how do you determine which media is suitable for the translation?
This is actually a great question, and a pretty complicated one for me. To be honest, I don't know how to determine it. So usually I'm just thinking about how, like, what is the most important in this text. For example, the novel, Amadoka. I understand that it won't happen in any other media, because the novel is huge. It is more than 1,000 pages. It's just a brick, so it won't be possible to use images like in visual art, because it won't tell us anything, just a piece of it. And I understood that music, which is the most abstract type of art, it can just say much more with this like concert. 1 hour long concert can say us much more than any visual art, because it is about something which is really difficult to visualize. It is very difficult to explain even with words, but feelings work really great for us, you know. And in this case, about this really complicated text about Ukrainian historical experience, about traumas, it is really hard to speak even with words, you know, to explain all this, because it takes long time. But music makes something which just makes us feel something, and we experience it. We can even, we're not sure what exactly we're experiencing, but it happens with us in this very moment. And I think that with this project, it was the most important to understand that we're trying to share experience. This is super difficult. It is almost impossible, but we can create the possibility for the audience to have their own experience, to feel something about this topic. And maybe it will like just help somehow people to understand this topic. Like I can't say like to understand it really better, but maybe just to feel it better, you know. And every time with different projects, it's about this main or key idea of the text, because source text usually like something matters more, like the form, the matter for style, the idea, something which is like very bright and important for the author, or like, I mean, like for the curator, for example. Yes, for me, important to share it in different media. So I just distinguish that this is important for me. It's personal, and I'm happy if I see that other people do something different with the same text, you know, because as I told you, and like this is the just general idea, that the more translations we have, the better, and we can communicate through them, we can discuss them, and it is just a great thing to promote reading, at least, you know. So yeah, I distinguish that it will work. It will work for the audience, and also as a art curator of the Translation Festival, the festival which works with the audience and works with the city as well. In the festival, we as a team, we think about how to be visible, how to promote our field, how to promote translation, how to speak about it to people who are never interested in this, but who can notice it, you know. And in this case, it is also one of the ideas for the translation to be visible. And I keep it in mind every time when I'm working on the project, because I want it not to just to be like a kind of a bizarre experience for me and like for making it just for fun, but for the people to enjoy it, you know, to attend these events, to have fun together. Because I guess that this is the very same type of art. The translation is a great type of art, and these projects just is a great possibility to show it.
We have a question from the participant. They sent it in advance, so I will read it. So the question is, I just read some paper about the intersemiotic translation, and the concept of this topic is so interesting. Would it be about not only concentrating on the language, also their non-verbal form and the translation itself, but as well focusing on the meaning and cultural approach? In my little understanding about this idea, if I make a film visualize the feeling of my people during Vietnamese War for international viewers, will it be intersemiotic translation? So that's the question.
Can you please read the last part, like the last?
The main question is, if I make a film visualize the feeling of my people during the Vietnam War for international viewers. Will it be intersemiotic translation?
This is a great question, and this is also about like the terms, but what we call intersemiotic translation. And actually, yes, my answer will be yes. So obviously, we can call any type of film which expresses history and intersemiotic translation, because this is the artistic view on the historical event, you know. And so yes, so basically it is translation as well. And 2 days ago, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine. He's a poet, and he makes different like cross-medial projects with poetry. And it is also intersemiotic translation. I read it as intersemiotic translation, but he says that it is poetry. So like every his installation is poetry for him, and I can read it through the prism of intersemiotic translation. And we had discussion like, what is it actually? And then we entered an exhibition, and there was a text exhibited, a kind of like poetry exhibit. And he also said, okay, they called it an installation, but I will call it poetry. And I said, I will call it intersemiotic translation, you know. So actually it's a funny thing. And for me, I guess it's just important, like how you call it, because then you can explain to the people what it means on your side. But the most important for people to make their own impression, to have their own impression, to have their own thoughts on this piece of art. So like then I won't dictate, you know, how to call it. It's up to the audience. But when the artist or the creator creates the piece, so of course it matters how you, which direction you are just going, but then the piece works itself, and it's great.
Yeah, so I think I just have the last question on my part. Like, what is the most powerful thing you find during your process of doing translation, intersemiotic translation?
Yeah, this is great. So when I'm still working as a regular translator, but as a member of a collaborative translation group, Verbatia. And this is it. Also, it has an explanation why I work like this. It's very boring for me to work by myself, just translating like from English to Ukrainian, for example, you know. But I love to work with people. That is why to work with 2 more colleagues of mine is much better than to work by myself. And it makes me happy to communicate, to discuss, to argue sometimes on the way how to translate it better. But again, like for all my practice, I guess the key element is communication through literature, through translation. And I think that communication here is the most important part. And in intersemiotic translation, also, I interact with so many great people, professionals of different fields, and I'm just fascinated with the way of thinking from the different perspective, because I would never understand how to be a musician, for example, or how to be an artist, or how to draw murals, you know. But we can create things together, and we can like I can reach this field, you know, through communication with people and through making our common projects. And I think this is something which is essential in translation, and which is essential for translators, when you can reach something which is far away, or even like the text which was written like many centuries ago, but you can, through translation, or just like through reading, you can reach these ideas, you can speak to these people, and this is just great, just like traveling throughout the universe.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question from the audience. So he says, "Hi Veronica, I kept thinking about how most media gets interpreted in textual content like curatorial statements. So what draws the line between intersemiotic translation, as in textual content transposed into the languages of materials, and materials interpreted, translated, explained in textual content? When will the latter be considered intersemiotic or not at all? Not at all. So the question is in the chat. You can see by yourself.
Okay, how to open it?
I will
Please.
I will resend it for you. Okay.
Second. Yes. Okay. So as I feel like the most, maybe it's interesting to speak about how to make vice versa translation into text from different media into textile form. So because previously I was sharing about all the projects which were translations from literature to like different types of art, and of course it can be vice versa, and it can be in different forms, and even like a curatorial statement as well, or like an essay, or just like another poetry piece or literature piece. So again, it's also the difference is in methods of translation, because the first thing which we have to do is to figure out how this piece of art works, like which methods, or like which topics, which elements are preserved in this piece, and which we need to preserve in, for example, textual piece. And it's as well, it can be about it. It is always about interpretation, and also it is about your own creativity, because we actually share our impression on the piece of art. And again, I'll just continue my thought that if you call it intersemiotic translation, so no one can argue because you have your own arguments, and you can prove it with your own methods. And so like basically the idea is just to try to feel free to try different things, and to translate into different media wherever you like. And if you feel yourself more confident with text, with literature, with prose or poetry, so this is just great. This is your tool, and you can explore it.
Thank you. And I would like to ask if we have any question from the audience or any comments, sharing you want to share today? So if we don't have any questions, so I think this talk is going to end. And thank you so much for spending time with us today to share a very interesting and also new topic in Vietnam for the student in Vietnam. And also thank you, Mai and Phương, for your great work on the translation during this event. So I really love to
thank you so much for hosting me here, and this is amazing. And yeah, my great appreciation for translating all this. It was a challenge, I guess, because maybe I was speaking too fast. I'm sorry, I forgot about it. Excuse me for making you trouble. And yeah, thank you so much for this set of events, and I wish you good luck and to have a great host and great events about translation and literature. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope that your work in July and August will be great.
Thanks, I hope so too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'll keep posted.
Thanks, Veronika.
Thank you for coming.
So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Nice
Goodbye.
day.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye. Thank you. It was a pleasure for me.